Today is August 28th, 2022. Current Bitcoin price is $19,609.
Welcome to the BitBite podcast, your source for news and information about Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency space. This podcast is meant for educational and entertainment purposes only and is not financial advice.
What's going on, Rick?
Oh, another day in paradise. At
Yes,
least
sir.
We're together this time.
Yeah, it's been it's actually, you know what's sad is that we often record separately,
Yes.
even though we're like a mile apart from each other.
Well, that's where we live, but I mean, you live on the road half the time. So.
Exciting stuff.
Exactly.
Exciting stuff.
But the good news is I have my own podcast recorder, so whenever you're out of town, we can still keep consistent.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do. I either need to get myself a headset with some microphone. I need to test out that the Audio Technicas, the wireless Bluetooth ones that have the microphone, and just see how well those work with like my Surface when I'm on the road. Just see if we can record that way.
No, that actually might work out pretty good. I mean, if all else fails, I don't know if your phone has an output jack. But those headphones, the Sony headphones, is what I use to record.
This ain't got. Well, I mean, I could probably do it through the Bluetooth again, but yeah, this doesn't have. The new phones don't have headphone jacks. Like, what is that? Headphone jacks. Those are going away.
It's the mark of quality.
It is the mark of quality. They're like, if we can strip away as many things as possible and sell you as many dongles as you may need, that's capitalism.
Capital K.
So Bitcoin dropped below 20 grand again.
Yep. Which we were kind of, last episode, we were a little bit more bullish. We're like, hey, man, things are going in the right direction. And but what was the word from Jerome Powell here recently?
He basically stated that he was going to continue to raise interest rates. I mean, and so here was the thing. Like last time we kind of theorized, and this was mainly me probably being hyper excited, right? Because I'm always the Bitcoin bull, right? Perma bull. I figured with midterm elections coming up that the Fed was going to either hold or do a minor increase in September. They did not do any change for August, which was technically the July meeting minutes that they released in August. They didn't do any change. Like they held strong, like nothing changed, right? Jerome Powell's basically stating that in September, we're probably going to see an increase happen.
Yeah. And, you know, your thought was, hey, you know, at least before the midterm elections, we're not going to do anything crazy, right?
Yeah, well, and I mean, you even saw, I don't know if you saw Biden announce there was 0% inflation.
Yes. Well, yeah, he says a lot of things. And, you know, the people behind the scenes kind of correct him. So.
I'm just making hands like a puppet.
Yes.
And I'm not trying to get political here.
No.
I'm not Republican or Democrat, just that man sometimes.
Well, but the thing is, you know, let's talk about Trump. Last time he was in office, when the Fed started raising rates, he started complaining, and then they kind of backed off.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I mean, the president does have some pull there. So, I mean.
And well, yeah, and I guess that's still the question is what's going to happen. What's going to happen going into the midterm still? Like, I mean, because we're not that far away. We did see student loan forgiveness just come out, or $10,000 worth of student loan forgiveness, which for people that actually have a lot of student loans for any major degree, that's a drop in the bucket. That's not going to help them.
Well, I mean, it's going to knock off some of their interest, like the principal over the long term. That helps, I guess, in a way. And that's obviously just a tactic to grab votes. I mean, that you're just buying votes with that. But I mean, if I had student debt, I'd probably be pretty excited about that.
No, for sure. I mean, if I still had my student loans from my years in college when I didn't get any degree and I just wasted money, like that totally would be worth it.
Oh yeah,
that would have wiped out all my student loan debt. But there's people out there like that have hundreds of thousands, right? Or at least in the 100,000 ballpark that like I said, that's not going to do a whole lot for them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what does it cost to go to Harvard nowadays?
It's probably, no idea. I'm not that French.
I'm just saying it's probably somewhere. I don't know if it's quite $100K per year, but it's got to be somewhere in that neighborhood.
You've got to be getting close to that.
That's maybe $75K per year. I mean, 4 years of that, you're up to 300.
Yeah. Yeah, that's that is so difficult to judge. Like, I mean, especially as to how worth it is it to pay it off. I mean, and don't get me wrong, and I guess I don't want to go into the educational discussion, but that's a lot of money unless you're going into a very specialized field. Like if you're going into medical, if you're going into engineering, if you're going into some sort of electrical engineering again, I mean,
or legal. If you graduate with a law degree from Harvard, you're probably
going to make some money. But other than that, like,
you get your
you go to Harvard,
African studies or something like that, women's studies,
like as a sub major, but not as your major.
Major.
Like, I mean, like, do you go to Harvard for educational studies? Like, I mean, I doubt that.
They have those degrees there, so. Matter of fact, it's the Ivy Leagues that were kind of the propagators of some of this more social justice type politics. So, I don't know. I mean, all I know is the one thing that we're talking about lately is inflation. We're talking about the government spending way more money than it's taking in. Mm-hmm. And this is no bill to like say, hey, we're going to tax this or we're going to do this to pay for it. It's just like, hey, we're going to print some more money.
Yeah. Well, and that's the whole thing, like this student loan reduction, right? It's stimulus in a way, right?
Yeah, it's pure stimulus. It's stimulus that's buying votes.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I don't know. Obviously, I'm not going to get to benefit from that, but I'm kind of curious how that's going to play out, what that is going to do to inflation still. We've seen the inflation cost reduction bill that got signed through. Yeah,
I've actually looked at some of that stuff, and there's nothing in there that would reduce inflation anytime soon.
No, and I don't. Anytime you put government price controls in a capitalistic society, I don't see it ending well in the long term.
Well, I'm not sure about the price controls, but I have been looking at the solar stuff, the solar credits and things of that nature. And basically it's just saying, hey, if you buy solar and you do green energy and you do this and that, you're going to get tax rebates for X amount of dollars. And they're trying to like put some of it towards electrical vehicles. But with the inflation that we've been seeing, that whatever gains you get from your tax write-offs are basically moot because the prices of everything have gone up. So, yeah, it's a slippery slope, and like, there's things that obviously I think society can benefit from, but I don't know where they think all this is heading, unless we've talked a little bit about trying to wreck the United States economy, which essentially, I mean, the whole point of the Fed doing the raise of the interest rates is that way they can do the soft landing, right? Try and attempt a soft landing.
That's the thing. Is like, I mean, he's basically saying, I'm going to crash the economy, but I'm going to do it so gradually that when it really starts to kind of go into that debt spiral, I'll be able to reverse things right away.
At least that's the hope, right?
I've never seen it succeed.
I've never seen them succeed. I mean, the more you look at what they're trying to do, I mean, anytime the government tries to do anything, like they try to make healthcare affordable, they try to do a war on drugs or whatever, it just seems whatever they're fighting against, you get more of it.
Yeah.
So, and sometimes, for the longest time, I was like, bureaucrats, they're just freaking useless. They don't really know what they're doing. But at a certain point, it's like some people know what they're doing and they just don't care. Yeah. In my opinion.
I can see that. I think I want to say, whenever you go into politics, and I assume this is true, and I hope this is true, when you go into politics, whether you're left or right, it doesn't matter. I think people genuinely want to help people in some way, at least in the beginning. I think they lose the sight of that as they continue to move through the arena of politics, right?
They get corrupted. I don't know. Is maybe in a way that's worse because they go in there all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and they come out freaking Satan. So
well, and I mean,
we're doing Satan's
when you
bidding.
think of, and again, I'm not trying to be political here, but when you think of AOC and her comments, whether you're a big supporter of hers or not, I honestly believe she thinks she's doing a good thing for her constituents.
Maybe.
I don't think she's necessarily corrupted per se, but I think she just very much believes in what she's speaking.
Yeah, maybe. I'm not going to disagree with you on that, but one thing about AOC is she's not particularly bright. That's one thing I gather when she talks, because she just says a whole bunch of nonsense, and yeah, that's just me.
No, and I completely agree. But like I said, I think when you enter into that political arena, I think you honestly have your constituents' best interest at heart. I hope. That's my hope, anyways. As to whether or not it stays that way over the long term, that's debatable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, something else. Well, this kind of ties in with some of the things we were talking about with like the green. I mean, this Inflation Reduction Act. It was basically a lot of stuff that was like Green New Deals type situation. And one thing I want to bring up is what's happening in Germany. In France, they've been shutting down nuclear plants. They've been trying to go solar, and they relied heavily on Russia's natural gas shipments. And Russia's basically turned off the spigots.
Yeah.
And from what I'm seeing, they're paying €800 per megawatt hour, which, if you divide that by, I mean, that's what the price spiked up to a couple of days ago. I haven't even checked.
We were talking about that. I want to see what is the current conversion rate of euros to dollars.
Well, I'm just curious to see what their prices are, because it's completely skyrocketed. This is uncharted territory as far as energy costs. This winter in Germany, and we've talked about this before, Europe is kind of a higher latitude. That's more like northern America, like the northern states. That's their general latitude.
They're already starting to get cold.
They're starting to get cold. Yeah, I mean, when winter comes and they can't afford to heat stuff, and you're paying $800 per megawatt hour. I mean, I think we pay about 9 or 10 cents per kilowatt hour.
Yeah, right now €1 equals 99 cents, basically.
So we'll just call them even. So if you had to pay $800 for 1,000 kilowatt hours, just think of how much. I mean, the biggest energy users that you have is if you have electrical heating in your house. That's so expensive. Like it costs, it'll cost you like $100 a month in our prices at 9 cents per kilowatt hour. If you had to pay 80 cents per kilowatt hour, I mean, that's 9 times as much.
Well, and it's kind of interesting you bring that up too. I don't know if you heard about this too with the Dutch farmers. I think we may have talked about that a little bit, where they're basically saying they need to switch to greener forms of agriculture, right? So, I mean, they're talking about having EV tractors, those types of things, and they're basically not permitting them to grow unless they have those in place.
It's not even that. It's also that they're trying to limit their nitrogen use.
Yeah, so the fertilizer's got to be reduced.
The fertilizer's got to be reduced. Well, did you see what's been happening in Sri Lanka?
Oh, yeah. Well, we've talked about that one before. They've got no food.
That's because, I mean, agriculture, or the current methods in agriculture with fertilization, allows you to basically double your crop yield of what you would have naturally.
Right.
So if you all of a sudden cut out half of your crop yield, I mean, things are going to be tough. And then they're trying to push that on the Dutch. They're also talking about doing that in Canada.
Yeah.
So that's where I get all tinfoil hatty, because I'm looking at some of this Build Back Better crap. And that's part of what the previous budget was they were calling it Build Back Better, which is language from the World Economic Forum. There's a lot of different countries implementing this stuff. Like they're trying to shut down coal plants. They're trying to go subsidize green energy. They're trying to get rid of, I mean, They've announced in Europe that in 2035 that they're going to not allow internal combustion engines to be sold after 2035. Mm-hmm. And then California just came out and said that they were going to do the same thing.
Yeah.
So
yeah, the emissions stuff. I mean, California's been pretty crazy with it. The CARB and the carbon emission standard out of California right now. I mean, with the trucks and the emission standards that they have to meet, there's a lot in place already. Because you've got the EPA certification currently, and then you got CARB, California CARB. And California CARB is much more extreme than what the EPA emission is. And so most people buying trucks right now for the emission standards. And I'm not talking about your over the road truck. I'm talking
about long haul trucks.
Long haul trucks. They've got to meet that CARB requirement if they plan on going into California at all. Now, you don't necessarily have to have it to go into California, but you cannot stay over an extended period of time without having that CARB certification. You've got to get at the purchase of the truck. You can't do a change of it later.
Yeah.
So most people are going to opt to get the California CARB emission standard rather than going with the EPA standard.
Just because if you're going to be driving anywhere near California, it just makes sense.
It makes sense. Well, and I mean, but then it shuts down, like your idle time. You can't idle for more than 5 minutes, I think is what it is. And so after that, it shuts off your truck. So again, I mean, that causes problems at night, right? Like, I mean, if you get cold, guess what? Too bad. Your truck's going to shut off. You can't warm yourself up. You'd have to get like a Webasto heater or something like that. But the crazy thing about all of that is that every time we see something like this, and I think this is kind of where you were going with that, and I apologize for interrupting, but basically who pays for that? It's the poor. Or everybody pays for it, but who can't afford to pay for it?
Exactly. It raises the cost for everybody, but the people most impacted are the poor and the working class. Mm-hmm. Well, even the middle class. I mean, you have to be really upper class for it to not really affect you at all.
Yeah, I mean, even in the standards of living where I'm at, not that I wouldn't even consider myself upper middle class, but I mean, even we've been impacted by this whole past 2 years, especially this past year. With the inflation and everything else that's been going on. Seen a little bit of a reduction at the grocery store, but not much. Yeah. But I mean, how long is that going to live? You know, how long until that goes back up?
Now, I've been warning about this harvest. I mean, talking about reducing fertilization use. I mean, the fact that we get most of our urea from Russia has not helped our fertilizer costs. They've tripled since last year. So,
and I don't know if you can answer this or not. On the reservation, do you have to abide by the federal mandate on EPA regulations, like in regards to fertilizers, or are you guys allowed to do whatever you want to? I mean, you'll pay for it for sure, right?
Well, they kind of do their own thing. I mean, they're more governed by the tribal stuff, but usually the tribe follows whatever the EPA does.
Okay.
But, so I'm not entirely sure about the specifics on that, but that's generally how it goes.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious. I didn't know if you guys would be held up by that or if you guys would be allowed to produce more with that type of thing, if that happens, right?
Yeah.
Well, I guess not if, but when.
Yeah. Well, we do provide our own. I mean, we do have like a warehouse where they do make fertilizer. But, the base of it is... most of that does come from Russia, or it has in the past. So
yeah,
that's why it's fertilizer prices are so much more expensive. I'm telling you, I mean, we're right beginning in the harvest season. Prices on food are going to go up.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid for people in Germany, and this might even go other places, depending on how bad things get. But there's going to be a choice that some people are going to make between heating your home or feeding your family.
Yep.
So I just want to put that out there. I mean, I'm not trying to be an alarmist, but there's definitely some stuff. Winter is coming.
Yeah, no, this is going to be a hard winter for sure. And I mean, even when you think about that, like in the Middle East, like as much as Ukraine is kind of a breadbasket,
oh yeah,
it's not for Europe that they're providing the food. That a lot of the grain and stuff that they provide actually goes to the Middle East.
Mm-hmm. Well, it goes to the rest of the world. And honestly, I mean, America feeds a good chunk of the rest of the world as well. So, but yet, like you're saying, Ukraine, they feed a little bit of Europe, but they fed a lot of outside.
A lot of Africa, a lot of Middle Eastern type countries. So I'm curious I mean, obviously food shortages are going to continue to happen if the harvest season. I don't know if farmers were allowed to grow this year over in Ukraine. Like, I mean, I don't know what that looks like for them.
Well, it's not even that they were allowed to grow. It's like what happens, like one of the shipping ports that a lot of it went out of is controlled by Russia. So
yeah.
So they're not allowing some of those shipments to happen. So yeah.
Yeah, we had talked about that, I think, on a couple podcasts ago. I think whenever Russia just said that they would allow, which, I mean, that alone should tell you a lot about the situation in Ukraine, right? If it's them allowing the shipments to go out,
they've got way more control over what's going on.
They've got a lot more control. They basically have their boot heel on your throat, and they decide whether you get to breathe or not.
Basically.
As much as people want to, I mean, and don't get me wrong, I love the enthusiasm of the Ukrainian people, but I don't think that they're winning by any means.
No, but Godspeed to them.
One tip of Permabull news I want to bring up before we end this: BlackRock is offering Bitcoin now to its investors.
That's interesting.
That's what is it, $2 trillion or $7 trillion that they hold under assets that can now, under their umbrella, be allowed to purchase Bitcoin, and they're actually going through Coinbase to make the purchases.
Well, I mean, I think long term that'll be good for Bitcoin prices.
Yeah, we've just got to get through this crypto winter first.
Yeah, well, I think we got to get through this winter in general. Winter is gonna hit everything, but I personally, we're not financial advice as we said, but I personally think that Bitcoin is one of the things that is a potential to keep you going. Whereas if you don't have any long assets, and if inflation continues to get worse, I mean, you're going to basically lose all of your wealth.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what we're facing right now. And I'm not trying to be an alarmist, but I am pretty worried.
Agreed. I mean, I think that's why we both decided Bitcoin was so important, right?
Absolutely. That's why we do this cast. And going forward, hopefully we'll be more consistent about putting them out. So
we keep seeing that. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. But hey, we have the equipment right here. That's what we're using this time. So I don't know. I'm seeing the proof right here.
Well, thank you all for listening.
Yep. Thank you.
We'll talk to you soon.